in my view, the Atlantic is still going to be the great highway, but it's not going to be the highway and have the importance for Canada that it did from 1910 through 1960 or 1970 or 1980. I believe the Atlantic will become the highway that allows our forces to go to the Middle East, to the Strait of Hormuz, and to access the oil of Arabia. And I think, and I'm talking about Canada, but when I talk about Canada, because I think one of the points I'll make a little later on is it's not going to be just Canada. It's going to be NATO, it's going to be coalition forces. But the Atlantic will serve as that road, you know, to the Middle East and then on to the Indian Ocean. But its inherent value as you know, as a great trading ocean that we historically look at it for, I think will be lessened dramatically. It'll also allow us to get to those places where there's a lot of turmoil, like Iran and Syria. And I would point out in things like the Strait of Hormuz that one of the greatest lessons of the first Gulf War was learned by Iran. And that's why Iran has submarines now and is adding more and more to its submarine community, not necessarily in big submarines, but in small submarines, because they realize the importance of closing off the oil route through the Strait of Hormuz. So that is a very key choke point issue for the world, which includes Canada. And I believe that we will have to participate in these. It's not a matter of whether our government will say, well, maybe we should or maybe we shouldn't. As I go through this little talk, you'll realize that, in my view, it's not a matter of whether we will or whether we won't, we have to. It's that simple. Pacific Ops is where the action's going to be. The Pacific's going to be the big player. The whole global economic focus is moving from North America and Europe to the Asia Pacific. No doubt about that. It's been happening for quite some time. We've all realized it. We don't talk much about it, but whether we like it or not, the power structures economically in the world are moving to Asia Pacific. As a consequence, you have the Asian navies growing rapidly, they're arming, and they have to be watched. The U.S., as Minister Graham said, has announced its primary focus is shifting to Asia Pacific. It can't be everywhere at once. It suddenly realizes it doesn't have enough military forces, but particularly naval forces, to be everywhere it wants to be. So it decided to make a hard decision and said our primary focus is going to be Asia Pacific, and that's where we're going. And everybody else had better start be ready to pick up where we be. I believe it's very likely that MARCOM will finally become the predominant command in Canada. Because I just believe the whole economic issues in Asia Pacific, the whole movement towards Asia Pacific, the whole things that happen, everything that's happening on the West Coast will dictate that from the Navy point of view, the Maritime Pacific will become a very, very predominant command in this country. The Canadian Coast Guard will be required to play a real role in the West too, from the point of view of the monitoring of the tanker traffic that's coming from Prudhoe Bay down the coast of British Columbia. We don't hear much about it back east, but by God, it's a rip-roaring issue out west. For any Westerners here, what I mean, it's a rip-roaring issue in the West, I've got to tell you. And this whole idea of a drop of oil actually coming out of a tanker and maybe landing on the pristine beaches of somewhere in BC that is completely and utterly uninhabited by anybody or any animal is of course a significant question, and it will be so. So you know, the Coast Guard will have a role there, and that Coast Guard will work with its U.S. counterparts. And already we see in places like the Great Lakes and everything where you have Coast Guard vessels with particularly U.S. constabulary folks on board Canadian Coast Guard ships, and I think you'll see it vice versa. That's the way of the future, I believe. And when you get, Canadian Navy has no constabulary capabilities, so it has to put policemen on board in whatever form they are. And then the military form of that is the U.S. Coast Guard. And I think you'll see more and more of that happening, and I believe that's exactly what happened during some of the drug things that happened in the Caribbean. So you're going to see more and more of that sort of thing. So when you look at the Canadian Navy and where it's going and where it might go, the weapons that you put on your ship are going to be very critical. And the systems you put on your ship to allow you to operate in the littorals, in my view, also lead you towards things like cooperative engagement criteria, where people that have targets, they pass information to you, and the guy up in the back row actually does the shooting, who may or may not be you. To do that, to have the sensors and the capability to be able to do that is a significant issue. And it makes the command and control system and the combat information system and all those other things, you know, rather insignificant, pale in insignificance beside that, in my view. Piracy, one more word in piracy. You know, we attacked piracy before because we sent the Marines to the halls of Montezuma, and they took out all these good Libyan folk and took care of it. But there is no structured community in a lot of the pirates. You know, who the heck do you blow up when you get up there? Okay, what government do you topple? It's very difficult because there are very, in these failed states, there are very little functioning governmental organizations. It's private. So, you know, it's a whole new way of looking at life, actually. Illegal immigration is just going to go up. Okay, it's not going to reduce, it's not going to go down. We in Canada, I think, are a bit spoiled because we're a long way away, but it's only a matter of time before we see it a bit on the West Coast, but before illegal immigration into Canada via boats, via small ships, via whatever, will rear its head in a big way. And you just look at our coastline and say, how the heck are we going to deal with it? How are we going to find those people? Again, domain awareness is going to be a really, really big issue. Drugs and contraband, that's my next little thing there, okay? See that guy there with all the outboard motors? He's a drug runner. Right? That thing goes like scat. You're not going to do that with a 22-knot frigate. That's a helicopter, my friends, okay? You've got to be air capable, okay? Or you're going to have some different kind of ship. But you can't have a small little ship run around all over the world because small little ships can't run around all over the world. So you're going to need to have air resources on the ship to send all over the world. Submarines. Last but not least, but very dear to my life. The fastest growing fun sport in the military world, particularly in Asia Pacific and Europe and various other places, is growth of submarines. You know, we get kind of jaundiced by the old Victoria class. You know, they say, well, they're not sexy, they're old, they're ugly. But submarines are growing everywhere. Okay, the growth of submarines in the world were anyway, everywhere. Those nations listed there are just a few, but they're all in some way augmenting their submarine fleet. And I believe that will continue. So, if people are augmenting their submarine fleets, then it means that navies who are interested in making sure that submarines don't do nasty things are going to have to learn ASW all over again. ASW, of course, the pundits always said, well, we don't need ASW because that little stuff, you know, it's gone, never be seen of again. And my 2 minutes are gone, I'm just not going to make it. But the forgotten technique of ASW is going to come to the forefront one more time. Naval budgets. Quick word. Budgets are being cut in the U.S. and Canada. They're being slashed in Britain, Australia, and the European Navy. Slashed. I'm not talking about being cut. Cut is too nice a word. They're being slashed, okay? And they will be slashed in the U.S. too if we get into this thing called sequestration. Before November the 12th this year, if the houses, both sides of the houses of Congress don't get their act together with the president or the new president, and we get into this sequestration thing, man, you're going to see dramatic cutbacks on U.S. forces. I believe the Coast Guard too. Budgets are being increased though in China, Russia, and India. again, Asia Pacific. And with all due respect to anybody who may be sensitive, but in my view, US, Britain, Spain, France, Portugal, Italy, Greece are essentially broke. Okay?
Yep.
The debt is such that they're essentially broke, and that's going to change the dynamic tremendously. Okay, if you can't afford to go anywhere, who the hell is going to go? Mr. Graham talked about the U.S. and their resources. I'm not sure the U.S. is going to have all those resources when they want them. They may want to have them, but I'm not sure they're going to have them. So therefore, somehow we've got to get into that. The cost of building military units is increasing. The U.S. did a study over the past 50 years on the building of all their ships and all their types, and when it comes to surface warships, the increase per year on surface warships goes between 7 and 10%. That's well above the rate of inflation. The budget for the joint support ship was set in 2004 with a slight inflation factor. You know, budgets are going to be an issue whether we like it or not. In general, I believe almost all the Canadian programs are underfunded. I believe the budgets were done and all the good, but they have to be renegotiated again. And I don't know whether in actual fact there is a facility to do that. But I think it's going to cause some really hard decisions for us. And just true, here I go, in conclusion. Okay, how's that? Out of economic necessity, coalition operations will be the way of the future. You know, we've always talked about coalition operations, but it's not going to be like-minded nations, da-da-da-da. If we need to get something done, nations are going to have to get together and do it. It's not going to be like it was before. Events will force the RCN to be a blue water navy, whether it wants to be or whether the government wants it to be or not. If we're going to participate in anything in this world, we're going to have to be a blue water navy because we're going to have to deploy far from home. That's where it's going to be. And while so deployed, we're going to find ourselves working in the littoral, so we're going to have that capability. And the Canadian Navy must have the ability to do those operations and to fight in those littorals. Thank you.